And welcome to everyone out there in the world of PPMA and beyond. I'm Leatham Green. I'm the Executive Director of PPMA, and I'm just hosting today's session. And I'm delighted to be joined by the fantastic Juliet Alban-Metcalf from the Real World Group. The Real World Group are an amazing powerhouse of leadership, research, and development ideas. They're a fantastic organization who've been great friends to PPMA for many years, and I've had the delight of working with Juliet and Beverly Alban-Metcalf, her mother and founder of the Real World Group, for some time, and a big fan of everything that comes out of the organization. Internationally respected, and I can't think of a better way to kickstart our week than welcoming Juliet to the webinar. So good afternoon to you, Juliet. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Leatham, and thank you very much for having me.
Perfecto. And one question I've been asking all of my guests over the course of the last months is, what one thing, putting you on the spot here, have you found challenging about working through lockdown, or what have you missed, something you've missed, or what have you found challenging?
Oh, can I be completely honest?
Yeah.
What I missed most was nursery. Nursery's back now, yay! So that's made a huge difference. Yeah, it was just, but having said that, at the same time, it's genuinely, taught me about how enjoyable it is when you're forced to not work,
Yeah.
So I have got better work-life balance as a result of lockdown, which, I don't think would have happened otherwise.
Yeah, great. And thank you for your honesty and openness, which we all appreciate, I'm sure. If you've got any questions for Juliet as she goes through her presentation, if you can pop them into chat, and we'll have an opportunity for Q&A towards the end of today's session. That would be great. I'll pick them up. Otherwise, with no further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Jules, who will steer us through leading teams post-pandemic, how to thrive in the new normal. Over to you, Juliet. Thank you.
Thanks, Leatham. So, hi everybody, I can see Neil down there. So Neil, keep giving me encouraging looks, please. I can't see anybody else, but I noticed some wonderful colleagues and friends and clients are there. So hi everybody, and thanks for coming. I've called today's session Leading Teams Post-Pandemic, but I am very much aware of the fact that we might never ever be post-pandemic, that this might be something that's with us for a long time. And again, the new normal, I know some people are uncomfortable with that phrase. For me, it's important because it kind of symbolizes the fact that things aren't going to return to how they were. It might be a more gentle way of describing the future state of things, but I couldn't think of a snappier title. But I'd be interested in your suggestions after the session about how we might describe the future. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to start off with a slide looking at some of the context. So what are some of the research findings around how people are experiencing lockdown from a member of a team perspective. And then I'm going to go on to summarize the advice that's been provided by psychologists like us, other leadership and organization development experts around the world, about how leaders can really help their teams to cope with and to potentially thrive through this period. And certainly, we need to go back to thriving at some point soon. So how can we do that? And then I'm going to leave you with some reflections, offer you a chance to ask any questions, and then as it mentioned in the publicity for this event, we're also offering you a free coaching tool offer if you're interested. But that's right at the very end. This is not, this isn't a sales pitch. I want this to be really useful. If you're interested in taking up the offer, then please hang on after the Q&A. Okay, so first of all, then let's look at, right, so for some reason my slides aren't moving. Oh, here we go. There we go. So first of all, let's look at some of the findings around how people are experiencing lockdown from a team member perspective. So you may be familiar with a survey that came out, I think it was advertised last week and the week before, by Hayes Recruitment of 16,000 workers, which is the phrase they used. And what they found was that 43% of people who responded to their survey felt that their leaders needed to improve communication at the moment. This is recent research. And given, when you read about the best ways to respond and some of the big challenges with the current situation, you'll no doubt be aware that communication is really critical. I mean, as it always is, but particularly now. So it's a bit of a worry that there's a lot of room for improvement in that. In addition, a third of employees said that they have contact with their manager less than once a week, and only 20% said this was daily. Now, you might feel like 20% is, that daily is not necessary, but certainly I think it may be of concern for a third of people not to speak to their manager more than once a week. And 34% of contact has reduced since lockdown, which again might be about less face-to-face, who knows, but something to be aware of. A People First survey on Twitter of 5,000 people, again very recently, said that, and this one I think is of more concern, only 24% of people who responded say that they discuss both health and well-being issues and performance and workload with their manager. So in other words, what they're indicating is that actually more people are only discussing the issues of performance and workload, and we know people need support through this period. So I would say that that is an issue of concern for us to be aware of. And 75% of people who responded to that survey said that they would like their manager to check in more regularly to discuss their health and in terms of health and well-being. That was 35%, and only 10% felt there was a need for more discussion around performance and workload. 31% thought it was both. And an even more recent survey I saw, which was out, I think it was on Friday, showed that 67% of HR chiefs, as they described, will be encouraging much more remote working and flexible working in order to increase flexibility, but also to reduce cost when things start to return to some form of normal. And this was, again, perhaps the most worrying thing. 8% of respondees admitted that they've done nothing to address issues of health and well-being among the employees of the organisations they work for. And that was the people that admitted to it. It's not the sort of thing that what we know from surveys is people tend to be less admitting the things that are, perhaps are more embarrassing or perhaps we're more ashamed of. So you might want to multiply that. It's a bit like when you go to the doctor and they say to you, how many alcohol units do you drink a week, or how many cigarettes do you smoke, and then they can automatically double it, apparently. So there's some food for thought there about some immediate things that we need to look at in organisation development and HR. Now, in terms of what we need to do differently, and by the way, all these slides will be available afterwards if any of these suggestions are of use to you. One of the key things, and those of you who are familiar with Beverly's work, Letha mentioned earlier on, will be familiar that we talked about this kind of thing before. It's really critical and increasingly critical in today's times that we are really vigilant as leaders of teams about avoiding destroying meaning for people who work with us, and that we actively work to build people's capacity and their resilience. That's going to be the key way we help people to deal with the enormous turbulence we're going through at the moment, and to sort of reconnect with organisations and to feel stronger and more able as we emerge into whatever new state this is. So there's a well-known article by Ameble and Kramer, which was published a few years ago, which neatly summarised the ways in which leaders best destroy meaning and reduce the ability of teams to perform. And those are some of the issues that we need to be really aware of and watch. First one, of course, is micromanaging. So making sure that when we delegate, we do it in a way that actually enables people to get on with things, rather than so-called delegating, but then getting really involved in the detail. The next one, which again I think is particularly relevant now, is we need people to be bringing their ideas to the table about how we can do things differently going forward, or how we can do things in a new way going forward. And one of the key problems that managers often bring to the table is dismissing people's ideas or being cynical that things won't work before they've been explored in great detail. The next one, again, really critical right now because of how fast things are changing. Managers are brilliant at destroying people's meaning and motivation by neglecting to inform them when things have changed, in the wider organisation, and therefore rendering their current work, effectively useless because, things have changed. Or indeed, the other one, managers move the goalposts themselves and forget to tell people, so lots of effort gets wasted, or at the very least, people feel confused and unsure of what's expected of them. If we move on then to, what we do want leaders to do and what team leaders particularly need to do. Again, you'll be familiar with this list if you've seen Beverly talk before. But what occurred to me as I was reading through people's articles about post-COVID world and ways in which we need to address it, is that it again really reinforces what we've been saying for a long time. And the first thing is that we need to help people to reconnect with a sense of meaning in the work that they do. If you think how enormously organizations have changed, you know, you've got gin distilleries making alcohol hand gel, you've got, you know, pubs becoming grocery stores, you've got, you know, enormous change in service industry around what people do, what people can do, and what they're going to do in future. We need to help people to reconnect with meaning in the work that they do, and the way that, you know, what they're asked to do as well. That's enormously changed, and the teams that we work with, and so on and so forth. The next thing is autonomy. Autonomy has been forced upon people through this pandemic. You know, we've had to let people, you know, have more freedom than before because people are working more remotely, and we weren't initially set up for that, and many organizations still aren't fully set up for that. So this is a great opportunity to you know, to see what people can do and to really give them, as I said, you know, the chance to grow without being closely monitored. However, the critical thing, of course, with autonomy is you mustn't give people autonomy without clarity of expectations about what you want from them and what's, you know, not acceptable, but also without a sense of mastery. So as we increase people's autonomy in the work that they do, are we making sure that they feel equipped to do it? Are we making sure that they feel that there is support available as and when, you know, they need it? So that comes back to the communication point. You know, are we discussing things sufficiently with people? Then there's the issue of appreciation. That's never strong enough, and we really need to focus on that. Then there's the issue of psychological safety. Can people make suggestions? And social support, which I'll come back to later on. All of these things will help people with communications and building resilience and their ability to feel that, you know, we can move through this, and they will feel self-confident as we emerge into whatever work looks like over coming weeks and months. Now I'm going to move on to summarise some work that the British Psychological Society have put together. They're a special group looking at responses to pandemic and you know, what might be things for leaders of teams to think about to help their employees to be able to do well, to thrive and survive. They found that the most important thing for leaders to do is to be visible and to be available. And what they mean by that is being, you know, checking in when they can, helping to guide employees towards resources. So, you know, first of all, finding out what resources are available and then helping people to find them. Again, a leadership skill is always important, but particularly important now is accepting as a leader, you don't have to have all the solutions all the time. So how can you, you know, encourage your employees or other people to make suggestions or admit when you just don't know and you're still working that out? And that leaders need to be able to manage and tolerate uncertainty for themselves and for their people. So if you're working with leaders, or you're a leader who is used to always having the answers, always knowing what's going on, you know, getting some support to be able to work around that is critical. The next thing is about communication strategy, communicating regularly, frequently, simply and clearly. Being repetitive is not a problem, because as we know, when we're under stress and pressure, we don't always take all information in. So repeating things is important. Actively encourage people to express their concerns and their fears, and really listening with patience and compassion to what they have to say. Ensuring that human connection and methods of peer support are fit for purpose in these days' times. And one in particular kind of really practical thing is about revisiting communication plans with your team, encouraging your team to get involved in how do they want to communicate with you and each other. You know, what expectations do they have of each other in terms of when they'll get to do something? Because of course we're all balancing work and home, and you know, so many other things we didn't have to balance before. So, you know, there isn't necessarily going to be an immediate response and so on. So how can we manage expectations around that kind of thing? Things like, practical things like making sure people can see the history of a document, having version control, those kinds of things are really, really critical. And remembering that, you know, things like video conferencing, although they're trying to be inclusive, they can be quite exclusive because they don't necessarily, you know, hear all voices. And some people might find it challenging as well, of course, from an accessibility point of view. If possible, creating protective areas for employees to get together. So not just using Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams, whatever it is for work stuff, but can you create opportunities for peer support using that kind of media as well, and time in teams for them to share experiences, to support each other, and to also discuss what's been achieved. And then finally, the other aspect of this was about normalizing psychological responses. So leaders need to remember the situation is unprecedented. It's okay not to be okay. Experiencing stress and being human doesn't mean you're not up to the job. It just means that, you know, you are human, effectively. Giving people opportunity to step back or step out of current situations. Again, this needs to be figured out, because we need to make sure we're not creating an always on culture just because people are working from home and working at different hours of the day and night. Paying attention to when things are going well, celebrating successes, reminding people that they're not alone. I'm sorry I'm rushing through this because of time, but as I said, these slides will be available. And of course, reminding people this will not be forever. This is, you know, getting used to things. This transition will lead to, you know, some form of stability, going forward. And then for leaders specifically, what's really important, I would say, is to reflect on where you're giving your time and your energy. So here's an excerpt of a self-assessment tool that we have, and this is a typical profile of an individual who's completed it, about where they spend their time as a leader. And what you can see, the first group of dimensions, genuine concern for others down to consistency and openness, those are the issues that are more about working with individuals. And they are very often, unfortunately, kind of the less enacted or less focused on areas. And the ones at the bottom, leading the way forward, being strategic, inspiring vision, and so on and so forth, those are very often the most, you know, highly focused on. And particularly when it comes to organizations where there's a real pressure on performance and future and shareholder vision value and all those kind of things. And in times like this, when leaders are trying to find their way, those areas are naturally really focused on. What's really important is whether you use a structured tool like this, or whether you just do it informally, invite leaders to consider, perhaps through, you know, a very short diary entry every day, where have they focused most of their attention, and is it in the right balance for the people that they're leading? Is really critical. Finally, leaders need to look after themselves as well. This is really, really critical. There's an interesting article by McKinsey looking at CEOs in private companies in particular, which, you know, I would argue does well, in the most part, certainly apply to team leaders of any kind of organization or team. There's this constant pressure between needing to be calm but also optimistic about the future. You know, people need to be empathetic and highly engaged and fact-based in their actions, which can be, you know, a challenge as well, and have a long-term view and an effective short-term fix to things. So there's a hell of a lot of pressure on leaders in terms of what people expect from them, and they may not have sufficient answers yet themselves. So it may be, you know, very stressful for leaders right now. You know, certainly it can feel like that. And there's been weeks of pressure, you know, and this is the bit I'm not sure, you know, applies to all of us. I mean, I don't remember this 15-minute nap regularly on airplane journeys, but, you know, a lot of CEOs are missing that, you know. And let's remember that even, you know, Jeff Bezos, maybe his nanny doesn't even live with him. You know, maybe some of even those high-flying CEOs have issues with work-life balance and children. But going back to being serious, you know, don't ignore your body. One of the great quotes from the article, you're invincible until you're not. And those of us who've had, you know, health issues will know that, you know, it can be very surprising, you know, that suddenly one's humanity becomes apparent. So as leaders, the key takeaway is both this demonstrating empathy and being open to it is essential. Okay, so that's a summary of all the advice, and I hope that some of that is useful. Perhaps you might want to look at the slides again in a bit more, you know, a bit more of a, with more time. But here are some takeaways, some ideas to reflect upon. What we know about what's happened during this sort of COVID situation is that many people in organizations and teams have experienced much more greater autonomy. They've been able to engage in job crafting and so on. And one of the things to think about for any team is how can you find out about what people have been doing differently, what they've really enjoyed doing, so that you don't end up demoralizing people when you're able to take more control of things as a leader. How can you actually benefit from that? How can you kind of, draw the best from it and help people to still be committed and motivated in their work when they've enjoyed more freedom and job crafting in the past? Bearing in mind also that for other people, the situation will have been really scary, disruptive, psychologically damaging. How can these people be supported back into the workplace, or supported into a new way of working? What we've also learned, of course, and then particularly in local government, we always knew this was the case, but we know that there are leaders throughout our communities. There are leaders throughout our teams, throughout our stakeholders. What ways can organizations, really, benefit from that in a positive way, such that influencing is two ways? How can you influence how leadership is understood and practiced at senior levels? And finally, thinking particularly as HR and OD professionals, what needs to change structurally to help people to adapt to the new normal? For example, how are we going to recruit leaders in the future? Or what kind of leadership approaches do we want them to have? How are we going to appraise people? Do we need to finally accept there needs to be more room in our appraisals for people's leadership behaviour, how they interact with people, rather than more of just what they've achieved target-wise and those kinds of things? And how can you enhance employees' perspectives and what they need from leaders going forward? So I'm going to ask you now if you've got any questions or comments on the session.
Juliet, that was absolutely fantastic. And a question that's come in from Twitter feed here is, given that we know leaders often struggled with something like genuine concern for others in that kind of what was a normal space, now that we're doing it virtually, what kind of advice or guidance have you been giving to actually help organizations make sure that their managers can do this kind of work and engage with their workforce effectively using technology? I mean, it's probably picking up on some of that research stuff, isn't it, where 8% of organizations, and probably higher, as you say, are actually doing nothing, and around a third are actually having conversations about their health, well-being, as well as performance, meaning 60%, or that means a good more than half of the percentage of the workforce are not having any conversations potentially about this space. So what are you seeing happening, or what kind of advice can you give to help in that space?
I mean, it seems that the way I would always approach it is to try and make the business case for people. So, you have a great opportunity now. Hopefully leaders are asking for more support about their, how they work with their teams, how they support them through this time. And I think as HR and OD people, we have an opportunity to say, look, if you really want to know what needs to be focused on, it's how, we balance between the what and the how of leadership, how we make sure that people are, of course, achieving what we need them to achieve, but also that we're supporting them in their, on their day-to-day way of doing things, and perhaps, explaining some of the impact of not doing that with people. And then I would be encouraging the leader, if they are happy to accept there may be an issue in relation to how much they do this or not, that they might seek some informal feedback from their team around, do you feel supported? What could I do differently, and what can I do more of in order to support you as a human being, or getting the right balance between your well-being and your performance. I think that's really the best advice I can give. Leaders have to want to change, don't they? They have to be uncomfortable with the current situation in order to want to change their behaviour. And so I think hopefully one of the positives that comes out of this is more leaders who aren't sufficiently people focused will be uncomfortable with what they're able to achieve through their people, and will start to think about adapting their behaviour.
Yeah, that's a great thing. And there's some interesting stuff coming out from Johnson & Johnson and Unilever, who are demonstrating of their expectation of managers to be using technology not just to give information, but really spending time listening and seeking information and answers from what's going on with their workforce, and expecting their managers and team leaders to do it. And there's some great YouTube clips on that as well.
Oh, great.
And PPMA are just about to issue a questionnaire. We're doing this with Nick Chenery, who's a good friend of PPMA, and we'll be sending out a questionnaire looking at what's been happening in the world of PPMA membership in terms of access to support, health and well-being, and what is going on in terms of their work-life balance and during the course of the crisis and beyond. So watch out for that. It'll be coming out this week. And we'll share those results in due course. I'm just conscious of time, and just a reminder, because the session was packed full of information. We have the slides available. They'll be on PPMA website and the Coronavirus Hub, the resource hub. So feel free to access that, and also recording of Juliet's presentation. And one of the great things about Real World Group, which I'm always a big promoter of, is the products that they use. They're just so well researched and have such a great validity to them. And the Real World Group have offered a great opportunity for PPMA members to make use of one of those products. And could you just share something around that for us, please, Juliet, before we finish?
Yes, thanks, Lethem. As I mentioned when we shared with Lethem the summary of the session, we'd like to offer you a free coaching tool if you're interested. So I showed a slide earlier on of a self-assessment tool, which is called the PLI, which enables leaders to reflect on the extent to which they are in a current situation or a current period of time enacting particular leadership behaviours versus others. Now, they're all important leadership behaviours, but there needs to be the right balance for a certain person's role or what's happening at the moment. And it's not about kind of your underlying preferences and so on. It's actually how are you actually behaving at a given time. So if you wanted to use this in a coaching scenario, then it's enabling a leader to focus on where they're focusing their attention, and obviously things they're doing a lot of, how is that working for you, and would it be worth adapting that? Things that you're not doing very often, how is that working for you, and what would be the benefits of spending more time? So this is, for example, how you might get to help people to rethink when they're too much strategy and operation, not enough people focused. If you're looking in the future towards selection, you might think about a tool like this as a sort of foundation for a language and framework of discussing a leader's style and approach and how important they believe the people stuff is. And what we're offering, we're always offering free accreditation for this tool. It's been designed to be freely available in that kind of way. But we're also offering at the moment, if you want to become accredited, we'll give you two free units of this tool to work with either colleagues, or if you're an independent coach, then your clients. The normal price would be £60 plus VAT, so it is a very cost-effective tool even normally, but we're offering to. Now, if you're part of the Solace free coaching, you've already got this free for people that you're working with, but this will be in addition if you're part of the Solace program where we're offering free PLIs. If you'd like to find out more, please drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you, but also you can go straight to our website if you want to find out more about PLI in coaching and how it applies to today. Thank you so much, Lethem, for having me. Very
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to have you. I'm certainly going to make use of that fantastic offer. I encourage you all to do that, and your colleagues out there, in terms of the HR and OD space, and any other coaches that you've got. This is a great opportunity. And Juliet, thank you for that action-packed webinar, as my blinds just decided to drop off my window. So it's a good time to stop. And I wish you all well out there, friends of PPMA and beyond. And I look forward to seeing you. Well, Wednesday, we've got a guest who will be delivering a session on mindful yoga at 7:45 in the morning for any of you early birds. And next Monday, we will be joined by colleagues from Veridus, platinum sponsors of PPMA, who will be sharing some insights around the world of recruitment and workforce planning. So I look forward to seeing you then. We'll have Juliet also, who will be returning at our virtual conference, who's part of our awards celebrations. So it'll be great to see you then. And colleagues, remember to reserve your space for the virtual conference, which is in September. All details can be found on our website. So with no further ado, many thanks, Julia, and all of the team at the Real World Group. And thank you, everyone out there. And great to see you. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Many thanks and bye for now.
Thank you.